Welcome to our LB's Lover of Books author chat with Kai Harris. We're here to discuss What the Fireflies Knew. A little housekeeping. Please stay muted during the chat, and then at the end, you're going to have the opportunity to ask the author your questions. Feel free, though, to post down at the bottom. You'll see the chat box. You can go ahead and chat in there, and we will try to keep an eye on that so that if you ask a question while we're discussing it, we'll try to get to that question right away. But if you want to save it until the end, we would love to have you ask it live. To do that, what you're going to do at the end is click reactions, raise hand, and then I'll know you have a question at the end. Before we get to those questions, though, we are going to try to take a photo so that we can share it on social media, which helps all these authors promote their books. So we'll just raise your book and smile. If you don't have a book, just smile. We'd love to have you in the photo. And then we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and introduce this wonderful debut novelist. Dr. Kai Harris is a writer and educator from Detroit, Michigan, whose critically acclaimed debut novel, What the Fireflies Knew, is a Marie Claire book club pick. What the Fireflies Knew is also a Book of the Month add-on and has been named Most Anticipated Book of 2022 by Marie Claire, Buzzfeed, Essence, Bookriot, Bookbub, and more. Kai's writing, which centers on the Black experience, has inspired lectures at venues including the Mellon Emerging Scholars Conference and the National Black Writers Conference. In addition to fiction, Kai has published poetry, personal essays, and peer-reviewed academic articles on topics related to Black girlhood and womanhood, the slave narrative genre, and Black identity. Kai currently serves as an assistant professor of creative writing at Santa Clara University, and you can follow her on Twitter at author Kai Harris for a healthy dose of hashtag Black Girl Magic. Read more at kaiharriswrites.com. Thank you so much for joining us, Kai. We're so happy that you're here with us tonight.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Can you give us a quick blurb on this book? I always like to hear how the author describes it.
Put me on the spot right away. I usually describe this book as a coming of age story about a young Black girl who's navigating a difficult summer. If I have to keep it quick, that's usually about all I say.
Well, it starts right away with action. Why did you decide to have KB find her father dead within the first scene?
So that scene didn't exist for a while. So even though it's the first scene of the book, I didn't write it first. For a while, I was trying to figure out how I wanted the book to begin. And I decided to start in that moment because I feel like it's the moment that really shakes things up for KB. It's kind of like the moment after which she can't just go back to the status quo. It forces her to have to change and grow in certain ways. So I thought that would be an interesting moment in her journey to start with.
It really does stop her world right where it is. And well, what if that wasn't your first scene to write? What was your writing process like? How long did this take? How did you do it?
Yeah, so the book actually started out as a story. And I wrote the story when I was getting my master's at Belmont University in Nashville. And it was pretty different back then. I was writing a story that was, first of all, pretty much based in like a lot of my own experiences. And I was just trying to think back to summers that I used to spend in Lansing with my grandfather, and just trying to remember like the feeling of it. And it was like the story was very sensory. It was just like me trying to remember what everything looked like and smelled like and sounded like. And I was trying to put myself back in that moment. And so I wrote a couple scenes in that story that are still in the book now. The Firefly scene, which I named the book after, is one of the first scenes I ever wrote. And then also the caterpillar scene was also in that story. And so the story was actually called The Mayonnaise Jar, based on that mayonnaise jar that Granddaddy gives KB when she's looking for caterpillars. And so once I decided to turn the story into a book, my writing process basically, first of all, centered on needing to fictionalize what I had already written as a story. And so I needed to create a plot that, wasn't there. The setting has some autobiographical elements, but the plot isn't my story. And so I had to create those things, mostly because I didn't want to write a memoir. I wasn't interested in writing about myself for the book. And so I needed to kind of come up with a family life and a backstory for this character that I was creating. And then I just kind of stretched from what I had in the story. I just started thinking about other things that would naturally come of some of the stuff I was creating. Like I created KB to be a certain kind of character. So then I was just able to think through like, what kind of stuff would she get into? And then I started to write that way.
So you mentioned the caterpillars and the fireflies. How much of yourself is in KB or other characters in this novel?
Yeah, there's definitely parts of me in a bunch of different characters. KB for sure. She, I gave her some of like the things that I consider to be like quintessential me when I was a kid. Like I also loved to read. Anne of Green Gables was my favorite book when I was growing up. And so I gave her the same favorite book as me. I did love catching bugs. That part is also true to me. But I think that also there are parts of me in Mia, some things I wanted to explore about myself or my own family history are probably hiding in a bunch of the different characters. But KB is, rooted in people that I know in different ways. So I think I think as a writer, a part of my process when I'm developing characters is thinking about things that I know about either, people that are in my life or people even from, books or shows or, I'm like thinking about what types of things I can pull from characters who are intriguing to me, even if by character, I mean human beings who are in my life. And so I'm just kind of pulling little things that can help make that character really feel real and come to life.
Does the same apply to the grandfather character? Because you mentioned you went to Lansing with your grandfather. So are there bits of that in there, that relationship?
Yeah, so KB's granddaddy has some similarities to mine. Me and my granddaddy had a very different relationship than KB and hers, and mostly in the fact that I was very close to my grandfather growing up, and I spent a lot of time with him. He was grumpy, though. That part is pretty authentic, but he wasn't grumpy to me. So that was, again, true. He, my sister and I were his soft spots and one of my cousins. We were the three girl cousins, and he's very sweet to us, and he used to sing us songs and give us money and take us shopping, and just he loved to spoil us, and that part is consistent with KB's granddaddy. But I wanted to give him some things that my granddaddy didn't have, obviously. And so one of the most important things was I really wanted to create him as a character who would serve an important role in KB's life as a father figure and a mentor, and just an adult in her life who like talks to her and tells her the real about what's going on with everything. So yeah, definitely bits and pieces. And one thing that I didn't really even notice until after I was done writing is that my grandfather actually passed away when I was 12. And so the reality is, by writing this character, this story, the summer that KB is like 10 going on 11, that's probably the last age I would have been when I spent a summer in Lansing, because my grandfather came and lived with us in Detroit towards the end of his life. And so I was probably 10 or 11 the last time I had a summer in Lansing, which is, really fitting that I wrote a story kind of based in that moment.
That's really touching, because you were able to funnel those emotions of loss into a different character, but within the story, so that we as readers could feel it. And we could. I mean, it was excellent. I want to get back to Anne of Green Gables, because here's my copy, and I absolutely love. I mean, you can see it's an old copy. Yeah. And I heard you say it was your favorite, but you had other novels mentioned as well.
Yeah,
I have this one from college with my notes still.
Oh yeah.
And then I even have The Secret Garden, although a friend of mine did not return my copy. I know you mentioned that. So this is a more modern day one, but why did you choose those novels? Why were those the important ones to get in here?
I wish I had been like way more thoughtful about it as I was choosing them, because I think there was a lot of me just choosing things that resonated with me for one reason or another. So when I picked Anne of Green Gables, it was funny because I wasn't even at that time, I wasn't even thinking that books were going to really factor into this story. I just knew that KB was going to be a reader, and I needed to give her a book to read because she was in the car and she was on a long drive. And I was like, what would she be doing? Well, she's probably reading. And then I was like, what's she reading? And I just picked Anne of Green Gables because it was a book I loved when I was that age. And, then as I was writing, I started to think like, oh, okay, so she's reading Anne of Green Gables. Well, what's that like for her? How is she experiencing the book? And so then I pulled out my old copy and I was rereading some of it and thinking to myself, like, well, she's probably really connecting to this right now because of this other thing going on in her life. So maybe I can fold that into the story. So then I started really getting into thinking about how the book could serve as, a part of the plot and the character development. And so from there, I did think it was interesting to have her pick up other books. I think Secret Garden is another book that I read at that age that appealed to me for some reasons that I think would be similar to KB. I think that she romanticizes this idea of having this kind of place, this secret garden. She's very into nature and, she loves this idea of like having a space that's, hers and it's stable and it's safe. So I thought that book would catch her eye if she saw it at the bookstore. But then I really wanted her to start reading some other stuff. One of the things that comes up toward the end of the novel is Mia, points out to her that she does have differences from the characters in the books that she's reading. And Mia wants to encourage her to also read books with characters who look like her and who, when KB picks up Their Eyes Were Watching God, even though parts of it are advanced for her and, she's not understanding everything, she, recognizes characters who remind her of herself and remind her of Mia and her mom. And the way that they speak feels more familiar to her than things that maybe she's reading in other books. So I wanted to point that out because I think, for me growing up, I didn't read a lot of books with Black characters, especially not like Black main characters. And so I didn't realize what effect that was having on me until I picked up a book with a Black main character and read a story. And then I was able to see all of these ways that I felt connected in a different way. I think that books are so universal. I think that's the really cool thing about reading is that we can step into all of these other experiences. I read books all the time by people and about people who have completely different identities than my own. And I can still feel like I relate to this, 100%. Like I really felt seen by reading this book and all of these different things. But there's also something that happens when I, as a Black woman, read a book, written in the perspective of a Black woman. There's a different level of welcome. There's a different level of familiarity. There are, maybe references that I understand in a different way or that remind me of something specific. So I just wanted KB to have that experience as well. I wanted her to, she still has her books that she loves, but I wanted her to also understand that she doesn't always have to change things about herself. I think a big part of her journey is realizing that like, there's nothing wrong with her. And, she thinks that she needs to try to find, have this perfect family. But really it's, about the relationships that she's building with her family. So
when her sister brought that book, Amazing Grace, to her, it really was so touching because their relationship had been rocky for so long. Yeah. And this is a moment to say, I get you and I want you to be you. It was a very endearing moment. What books would you recommend to have more Black girl magic in that age group? Because, I don't remember reading very many Black perspectives as a child. I mean, I was saying bosom buddy, my bosom friend because of Anne of Green Gables. So what books would you recommend to us?
Yeah. So, one thing that I'm super excited about is that I feel like there are a lot more options now than there were when I was growing up. Like when I'm picking books for my kids, I'm able to, I'm able to have my pick of books from different perspectives, different identities, representing all types of themes and things that I want my kids to understand. So when I'm picking books for them, I think the biggest goal is just like trying to make sure that their library represents as much as it can. I want to showcase different experiences, different identities, different styles of books. So that's the type of thing I'm doing when I'm picking books for my kids. But in terms of just like Black girl magic, I mean, one of my favorite books of all time is Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn. If you haven't read that book, I highly, highly recommend you read it. It's set at the moment right before Hurricane Katrina hits. It's about a young girl who's 15, I believe, when the novel starts. And it was actually one of the big influences for Fireflies, because I loved this story that was about a young Black girl who was facing some really big external crises, not just with the hurricane, but other things that were going on in her life. But what was compelling to me was how many other things were super important to her in that moment. So her world wasn't consumed by these like big things that we're looking and we're saying like, oh, this hurricane is coming, and oh, these things are going on in your family life. But she's still just a regular teenager, and she was concerned about a boy she had a crush on, and she was concerned about relationships and fights with her siblings. And, in every chapter, there were different, like, small things or mundane things that were going on that were developing. But it was beautiful because I feel like it was showing that, like, even in the midst of trauma, we're all still going through our own human experience. And I think that gets lost sometimes, especially with Black literature, that sometimes we can be so immersed in trauma and these traumatic stories and forget that, like, these are still kids. I had some traumatic childhood experiences when I was growing up. And when I think about them, sometimes they don't even feel as important to me as other things that were going on in my life, and that was what I wanted to show with KB. All of these things are happening. And her big focus is like, I need to get my big sister to want to play with me again. That's what's pressing to her. So yeah, Salvage the Bones is one of my favorites. I just finished reading Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. It's kind of older now. I'm probably late to the party, but my reading pile is humongous. So I just read it. That was a really great read as well.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Salvage the Bones. We just fought this fight at my daughter's high school. They were a group of parents who were trying to ban it for an AP English class.
Oh, wow.
And it was unbelievable. Most of them hadn't read. Actually, I think the majority had not read it that were trying to ban it. But what was cool was Jesmyn Ward actually filmed a video personally to the teacher, and they showed it during the panel. And all the students showed up and really supported this teacher and supported this book. So it is an important piece of literature, and I'm glad you brought it up. I also want to talk about how KB is stuck between childhood and not quite being a teenager. And you talk about these hard moments, but she's always trying to find that ice cream cone smile, which I'm glad you put that phrase in there because it really makes you remember she's only 10 or 11 throughout this book and really what her goals are. So, talk about that a little bit, why you chose this age and why it was important.
Yeah, I had to fight for this age. Honestly, in the publishing world, this is a tough sell to try and write a book that's geared towards adults with such a young narrator. There's not a lot of books that do that, and it's probably not for lack of trying. I think that authors are writing those books, but they're just not considered desirable. And people were kind of saying like, well, I don't know if adults are going to want to read this. And, maybe we should try to make it geared towards children. And I was very resistant because a big part of the project, like what I wanted to do was show the importance of young voices and of us as older, adults to listen to and hear these younger voices. I loved the fact that we have to, like, if we're reading this book, we have to be in this mindset of this young girl, and we can't get out of it because it's first person, everything, the entire book, the entire world is all seen through her eyes. So you can't escape it. You're not able to put your adult lens on it and try to see and understand things that she can't see. Not so much. Like, there are some things that we just can't know until she knows. Like, for example, her mother's mental health, right? KB doesn't know much about it. Until KB finds out something about it, we can't know much about it. And that's a thing that, readers have asked me about. And I get it, it would probably have been easier if I had just said up front, well, this is where mom is going. Or if mom had said to KB and Nia, this is where I'm going. But I don't think that's the reality. You know, I grew up in a household where there were lots of people dealing with mental health issues, and no one ever said that to me. No one ever came to me and said, I need to take some time away to prioritize my mental health, or I'm going to go to this place because I'm having a depressive episode. Those types of things weren't said to me when I was a young person. And I think that that was a big thing that I wanted to reflect on, is like the fact that the young people in our lives are there, like they're right there in the midst of all of these things that are going on. And even if we try to shield them from it, a lot of times they're creating their own understanding of what's going on in the world around them. So, you know, when there's that scene where Granddaddy is talking to KB and starts to try to tell her a bit about what's going on with her mom, I wanted to showcase, like, this is how we can do that. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if we don't know the right language to use, we can still talk to the young people in our lives and try to at least let them know that, like, I'm here if you have questions. I'll let you know what I know, those types of things. So, you know, I really wanted to prioritize this young voice. I love coming of age stories. I've always loved coming of age stories. I think that they're so universal because all of us can remember this awkward time of our lives where we're just trying to figure things out. We're trying to make friends. We're trying to figure out who we are. Everything's changing very quickly. And so I just wanted to capture some of that in a story.
Well, with KB, I'm glad that we didn't know that stuff, because it keeps the reader wondering what's happening and what she is going to grasp and when she's going to grasp it. So it keeps that plot moving along. When you were deciding this book, did you plot it out? Like, did you know where you were headed, or did you just write until you got there?
I'm a bit of a hybrid. You know, people, you know, refer to themselves as plotters or pantsers, and either like plotting everything out or kind of writing by the seat of their pants. And I'd say I'm like somewhere in the middle. I definitely need to have the flexibility to be creative and to just like let the creativity flow when it comes to me and let the book go where it wants to go. I say all of the time that some of the things that happened in this book, I don't think that I consciously sat down and decided that they were going to happen, as much as once I got to know the characters and started putting them in scenes, then things would naturally take off, which, you know, maybe sounds a little bit too easy. Believe me, it's not. But it would really start to happen a little bit more naturally once I had, you know, I mean, I fill pages and pages with, you know, thoughts about my characters, like what type of stuff they like. But it's like, it goes very deep, you know, like I know for most of my main characters, I know like their complete backstory, things that have happened to them that are the reasons behind the choices that they make. You know, Nia has an entire backstory that's not in this book anywhere. It's not in this book because a lot of the things that happened in her backstory, KB doesn't know. And this book is KB's perspective. So we can't know that backstory. But when we see Nia do things like retreat, when she's faced with trauma, we can get an idea of what types of things have happened to her that cause her to behave in the ways that she does. And then later she does tell us about one thing that's happened that, you know, has, you know, caused her to react in the ways that she did around Daddy's death. But, you know, so I always leave this space for my characters to move as they would freely, given what I know about them, what I've developed about them as, you know, characters that are, you know, real and living and breathing. But then I do have to do some plotting because otherwise I'll get kind of derailed. So I'll usually have like a general outline for myself and I'll say like, all right, here's the things that I know I want to happen in this book. And sometimes it's like, I start writing something and I kind of know how I vaguely want it to end. Or sometimes I start writing something and I have no idea the ending, but I know like, this is the lesson I want the character to learn by the end or something like that. Or I'll know like different scenes that I think would be cool. And I think for this book, that was mainly what I had. I had like ideas of scenes. And so I had put a bunch of them on note cards and then I taped them to a poster board. And then I would move them around as it made sense. And then I would add little sticky notes in once I figured out how these things, these little scenes or moments, once I figured out how they connected to the larger plot or the like larger character development, then I would add those like little sticky notes in. So it kind of looks like one of those like charts that you make when you're like, you know, those like plot charts and it's like you're trying to solve a mystery. it ended up looking a lot like that, but it made sense in my head.
I kind of want to see that picture. Do you think you'll ever go back to this world you've created? I mean, you have information, that you haven't shared with Nia, and if you're not planning on going back, tell us the coolest thing about Nia we don't know.
These are both great questions, because I've been getting asked this question a lot, and it threw me off, because I think before being asked the question, I hadn't really thought about returning to this world. I kind of just wrote this book as like a standalone, and it sold as a standalone, and I was fine with that. But so many people have been asking, and it's made me curious. I don't know yet. I'm writing two other books right now, so it's not going to happen in this moment probably. But I think there are still some things to explore, for sure. Let's see, something about Nia. Well, I did a lot of character development around Nia in relation to KB. So I think I had thought through like what their relationship looked like growing up and the moments where it changed. One of the things that doesn't really come up is, the ways that Nia felt like she needed to be a bit of a mother to KB. And I think that it affects the way that she treats KB later in the novel, but I don't say it outright. But one of the things that was happening is that, mom was dealing with a lot with, the relationship with their dad. And she, as we learned, is dealing with some mental health issues. And those things didn't just begin after his death. And so, there were often times where, she wouldn't be super present, even if she was around, but her mind would be very consumed with what was going on with her husband and trying to solve that. And, one of the things that I was writing about as I was developing Nia's character was that she felt a lot of resentment towards her mom for, what to her felt like kind of choosing their dad and focusing on him instead of, kind of focusing on her daughters. And, Nia also felt a lot like she had to bear the brunt of taking care of KB. And I tried to show a little bit of that in the scene where she makes pancakes for KB, just to show that like she does know how to mother KB and how to nurture her. She's choosing not to do it in this moment because she's dealing with her own things. But she does have it, and she knows how to take care of her. So that was one aspect of her character that I think is hinted to, but didn't fully make it in the book.
Now, you just mentioned food, and I think food was a pretty important part of this novel. First of all, I do want your pancake recipe. If you'll share it with me, I'll share it with the group, because I know they sounded too good. But you mentioned greens, which is a family tradition for my family, and then you also talked about the meatloaf that the dad made. And what is that an important part of your family that you wanted to bring in to this novel? Because I loved it.
Yeah, I love food. So I was just very excited to write about food. But yeah, it is an important part of my family's culture. And my dad passed away when I was 22. So much older than when KB's dad passed away. But there were lots of things that I put in this book as kind of odes to him. And my dad loved food more than anybody I'd ever met in my entire life. Like, he would make anything look delicious, like whatever he was eating. And he got a joy from food that I didn't really think about. And I think that now, after he passed away, I think that was one thing I really connected with. And so I wanted to have this aspect of food as a way that people are connecting. And so for KB, there are all of these different moments. Obviously, with the greens, that was one of the big important scenes, because that was an important scene to me for so many reasons. First of all, I talked about wanting to just kind of show these mundane, everyday kind of moments, because I don't think that when we showcase the Black experience that it should be all trauma, and I don't think it should be all joy. I think that there should be just these moments that are just like regular stuff. And she's just learning how to clean greens with her granddaddy. And, I spent so much time on this green scene, and I was sure that my editor was going to make me get rid of it. This is just, you're taking too much time on these greens. But everyone felt the same way that I did about it, which is that it's an important moment. It's also an important bonding moment between the girls and granddaddy. And it's the way that, they're learning about their family legacy. Granddaddy mentions that he learned the same way from his mother, and now they're learning. And I also wanted to kind of allude to how this almost was broken, because they haven't known him before now. And there was a rift between mama and granddaddy. And I wanted to showcase in their relationship with granddaddy how much they've lost because of that. When KB gets to go through the photo album, she's like learning about herself by looking at these photos and being able to be introduced to her family history in this way. And so I wanted to showcase that as well. Like, food is a big part of like tradition and culture in a family. And so I wanted to show some of that. And also, I think a lot of the characters use food to show their love. And when I talked about daddy having this meatloaf dish, I tried to show that in the instances that he made it, it was always these moments where he wanted to show love to his family. It was, his kids' favorite meal, and he would make it for them, but he also made it for granddaddy when he was trying to impress him at the beginning of their relationship. So yeah, I think food was an important part of the story for me.
Well, I think the cooking scene was a love language in a lot of ways, and it was reminiscent for me, the scenes in Crying in H Mart, Michelle's Honors, that even though KB doesn't have her dad anymore, if she can cook that meatloaf later, it's a piece of him that she takes with him. And it was just, I thought it was well done. And it made me think of my cousin Selena, who I've watched cook greens many a time, and everybody raves for. So now you also talked about his drug abuse, not in a way that we normally see it in books, but it was talked about, but it wasn't talked about, and it wasn't seen as a horrible thing to the child because she still loved her father. So how did you keep that balance of having this character basically take a family down in a lot of ways through her eyes, but keep that love there?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I think is really unique about telling this story from KB's perspective, because imagine if even this was Mia's story, how different it would be. She has a completely different perspective about their dad because of her age and things that she experienced with him that KB did not. And so I really wanted to use KB's perspective to humanize this character and to show that, like, Daddy is not just a drug addict. She is able to tell us so many things about him that are not about that. And I actually really appreciated that when I went back and read how much of his character was on the page that wasn't focused on his drug use, because KB's not focused on that because, well, mostly she's been shielded from it a lot. So she doesn't know a lot about it. So she can't tell us too much about it. She tells us what she knows, but also she's it's very important to her to keep the memory of Daddy alive in positive ways. She is committed to this. She doesn't want it to just be a bad or sad thing when we think about him. She even, remembers him in ways that of how she wanted him to be, even if those weren't the ways that he was when he was alive. Because for her, what's important is that she is able to carry that with her. And she's able to carry this feeling of having been loved by her dad. And I think that that's really important because, I think a lot of times we can just completely label someone and put them away in this box and just say, oh, well, this is who they were. But obviously there's much more than that. I have had family members who struggled with drug addiction, who struggled with, alcoholism. And, for any of us who have, experience that with our loved ones, we all know that they're more than that. There are so many other things that we could talk about that might be so much more interesting than that thing. And hopefully they will be able to get to the other side of it. Daddy didn't. So the story is, kind of based in that way. But I wanted to just show that he also wasn't a bad dad. There were lots of ways that he showed love to his daughters and to his wife. And, I wanted the reader to take all of that away. And I didn't want it to seem like a typical kind of, okay, well, here's a Black story with these Black characters. And of course, the dad's a druggie, and this is, probably what he was like. Well, no, yeah, this is a thing that he struggled with, but this doesn't characterize who he was as a person. It's much more complex than that. So I think that's what I wanted to capture.
Well, I think you did a great job with that three-dimensional view of him because, so much we see just the one dimension of drugs and that's it. Now, from that, Nia gets more more of a viewpoint of that than KB does. But I tend to think her coming into her sexuality too at her age was a little bit different. So it's hard to tell what's causing her behavior. But with it, we know KB is starting to mimic that behavior.
Right.
What made you want to go down that lane to have KB experience what she did?
Well, I did not want to go down that lane. It was actually something that I went back and forth on. And I think the thing that I did know that I wanted to do was have Nia exploring her sexuality. Because when I was saying before that I was doing all of this work developing Nia's character, one of the things that I felt was I was trying to think about the differences in how she was processing trauma and how KB was processing trauma. And at her age and with her disposition, I thought it would make sense that Nia would retreat from her family in certain ways and look outward and look to other people or experiences that would make her feel happy, even if it was just this kind of false sense of happiness or security. And I thought that, at this age, it might make sense that she would think that she'd find that with boys, right?
Right.
And so that was something that I wanted her to explore. And so that was at first just its own standalone thing. I hadn't written anything about KB in relation to Nia exploring her sexuality outside of the fact that it was just keeping Nia away from KB. But then as I was reading over what I wrote, I started to notice that in every other instance, KB mimics Nia all the time. She does it all the time. And I started to think, how would she respond if she sees Nia behave in these ways? And she's witnessed Nia, in different moments, in different situations. It's not just about things that she's seen her do physically, but even when they're at the pool and KB is watching the way that Nia responds to male attention. And, it's a pretty small mention, but KB mimics it right away in that moment. And it impacts the way that she feels about Rondell in that first scene meeting him. At the start of the scene, she feels one way about his presence. And by the end, after seeing how Nia is responding to male attention, KB starts to feel a bit differently. And so once I started playing around with that dynamic, I think that's what led to the end scene, I guess, between Rondell and KB is that, unfortunately, I felt that if I was going to stay authentic to the characters I was creating and the types of things that KB would typically do, and then when I was going to have her run away, I was trying to think, well, where is she going to go? What would she do? Where in Lansing has she felt safe? And I just kept being brought back to this swimming pool where, that was a place where she described as feeling more like home. It reminded her of Detroit in all of the best ways. And so I felt that's a place that she would feel, drawn to. And also she's trying to do what she thinks Nia would do in a similar situation. And by that point, KB pretty much feels like everything has not gone the way she's wanted it to go. And she feels like she keeps being left alone and she wants to take control. And again, the way that she's seen Nia doing that is through boys. And so, really, I think that ultimately I wrote it as a way to show that there are these dangers that come from KB not having people to talk to about certain things. So she's not able to process certain things. And instead she's formulating her own conclusions and she's deciding what she should do. But she really doesn't know, and later when she ends up telling Nia about what happens, I wanted to show that Nia feels, she's pretty sad that she wasn't there for her sister in the ways that she should have been, that would have kept KB from probably being in that situation. So as hard as it was for me to write, I do feel like this is a part of the young coming of age girlhood experience. Unfortunately, I think a lot of young women find themselves in, these types of situations. I, personally experienced something around that same age. It wasn't what KB experienced, but I was in a situation where the same thing could have happened to me. And, I was that same age. I think this is unfortunately a thing that happens to us. And I wanted to explore that. And also I really wanted to show the beginning of healing that occurs between her and Mia afterwards.
Well, so much of the novel, she's counting. And when she's at that dumpster scene and she stops counting, I had to take a minute. Like I had to stop and just kind of back off, because as soon as she leaves the pool deck, as a parent, as an adult, we know what could happen, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, why? And so I started researching at that point, and I looked up, the American Psychological Association put out an article of statistics that 1 in 4 Black girls will be sexually abused before the age of 18. And it broke my heart. And, I think, girls in general have this as an issue, but Black girls are even more prone to sexual abuse. And even though it was extremely hard to read, I'm glad that you did approach it, because it's a voice that we may not hear otherwise. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, I did appreciate that there was trauma, but then you also go into forgiveness. So can you talk about that with the mom, with the grandfather? And I think this is going to be our last question before we get on to the picture and the galleys questions, if they have some. Okay. So what were your thoughts on that, and why did you choose the route you did?
Yeah, I think that I was trying to figure out the whole time I was writing how I could get to a certain point. And I think I ended up at a different point than I thought I was going to end up. The ending was slightly different than what I imagined it would be. But I think it was really important for me to have characters just like having conversations, working through things. KB comes into this novel kind of thinking that she can fix everything and everybody. She's like, okay, this horrible thing has happened, but it's all right. I'm going to get everybody, we're going to, get back to our lives in Detroit. I just have to fix this relationship between granddaddy and mama, and I'm going to fix the relationship with me and Mia. And, she thinks that she can, fix all of these things. And what's really great to me about her character is that she does end up fixing everything, which is really cool because she's the youngest character in the book. And, she doesn't know a lot of the context behind most of the things that she's trying to fix, but she causes people to do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. And those are things they need to be doing in these moments. She causes people to talk about things when they would otherwise try to keep them to themselves. She causes people to have the difficult conversation, to confront the fact that there's been a rift between us for years, to, I think that there are all of these things that as adults, we maybe just won't do. And for those of us who have kids or are around kids or know kids, I think kids have this uncanny ability to just kind of push you out of that sometimes, like I'll be all worked up about something and I'm not saying it or whatever. And my 6-year-old would just like ask me a very easy question, like, well, why don't you just tell daddy that you want him to put the dishes on, away out of the dish rack? Like, why are you going to just be upset all afternoon? You could just tell daddy that you want him to do this. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I could. And so I think it's really cool because KB is just like this force in the novel. We think that we're just watching this story unfold and it's about her having to heal and, work through her trauma and figure out who she is and all of this. But she's just wandering around and she's doing the very thing that she's been told not to do, which is, she's not staying out of grown folks' business. She's not going to just quietly sit there and be a kid and play her role as a kid. She's like, no, I have questions. And the grown people's business is my business because it's happening right here in front of my face. And so, I wanted her to push characters to do those things. And I think that, especially for me, being a Black woman and knowing a lot of the stigmas around mental health in the Black community, knowing a lot of the things that, the traumas in the Black community and the ways that those things then manifest and break relationships, break families. I'm just thinking about all of the, as I was writing, I'm just thinking about all of these like generational curses and generational traumas, and just wanting to think about how one story could show another side of that, and could show, the power of this one young girl's voice to just say, like, we don't have to, our family doesn't have to be broken. We can fix this.
Yeah, I loved the naivety of that she's going to get glass bottles and it's going to get back to where she was going to be. And she had a solution for everything. I loved it.
Yeah.
But she's so resilient that way. And I think that's what helps her in the long run, her resiliency to be able to heal and to love and to feel life again, which was amazing. Yeah. All right, everybody. We're going to go ahead and take our picture now. If you have your book nearby, let's go ahead and turn your camera on if it's possible at this moment. And I'm going to have the moderator, my husband, Mike, take a picture if possible. All right, Mike, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead. We're ready when you are.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, cheese. All right, let me save that.
Do one more can we do one more just in case, guys? Just make sure. Y'all look great, by the way. Thanks for turning your cameras on.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, cheese.
Awesome.
Got it.
Thank y'all.
Wow, right. It looks so great to see all of y'all with the book. That just put such a huge smile on my face.
Oh, we've been chatting about it. Everybody loves it. It's been so exciting, but I know some people wanted to ask questions. So if you do, will you go ahead and hit the reaction button and raise hand if you have a question to ask her? I see there's one in the chat box already, and I can go ahead and ask that, Tommy, unless you want to come and ask your question. All right, Tommy writes, I found the age gap between Amazing Grace and Their Eyes Were Watching God showcased the disparity in publishing, especially in the 90s. I don't know if it was intentional message to publishers, but it's certainly timely. And I love that the canon is being tilted to include characters like KB and Anne and Mary. I have recommended the book to so many of my friends with kids who need to see characters like KB.
Oh, thank you.
Such a compliment.
And that's absolutely true. I was thinking about what books that I read that featured Black characters. And one thing I noticed is that, back when I was growing up, the only books that I can really remember reading that featured Black characters in prominent roles, they were all slavery stories. They were all about people enslaved. I can't remember. Yeah, I don't know. There was like this one. It wasn't the American Girl doll one, but it was like similar to that. I can't remember the name of it, but that was one of the first ones I read. And then there were some later that were like young, like Amazing Grace, came out, and that was, but by that time it was beyond, it was below my reading level. So the first time I remember really reading one, I was in high school when I read a book that was about that featured Black characters prominently, and the characters weren't enslaved. I think that was probably in high school. And granted, my library was probably limited in other ways. I went to predominantly white schools during my upbringing. And so I think that my access was also different. But yeah, so there's a lot to say for publishing. And I do agree that there's this tilt that's happening now. And it'll be great for all of us if, when we think about the canon, when we think about coming of age stories, when we think about certain kinds of stories, that they're not just stories that, feature characters of one perspective or identity, but many, different characters.
The only book I remember where I saw a Black child was Jack Ezra Keats' The Snowy Day.
Yep.
I had that book because my mom subscribed us to the Children's Choice Book Club, and we would get a book in the mail. And when it came, it was just, I was like, it was so different, but we loved that book. But I don't remember a lot more coming through the mail or, even in our library, although we were, again, a predominantly white town. The same issue.
I remember that one too. My kids have it now. So that's a great book. But yeah.
Now, I'm just going to keep asking questions unless someone raises hands, but let's talk about the
It
library.
looks like, I think Talisha, I don't know if that's how to pronounce it. I see her hand up.
Okay, let's see. Yes, go
Alicia
ahead and
Washington.
unmute. Go ahead and unmute. I don't see her. I can't see her.
It's
on
looking
here,
like
so
she can't unmute. She's,
I will ask to unmute.
oh, it just did for a second.
Am I?
Okay, are you there?
There you
Tony?
go.
Yes.
Okay. Hi. Okay, so first, just like a really quick comment on your 10-year-old narrator. I thought that was so important that you have written a book for adults where the narrator is 10, because I think she speaks to all those years that we didn't have characters that look like us for us to read about. And so it's like, it's kind of, in a way for me, it was making up for lost time. But my question was actually about Nia. You mentioned that you mentioned her perspective a couple of times, and you mentioned that you identified with both of those characters. Did you ever feel tempted to stray into Nia's perspective? How did you discipline yourself to stay in KB's head the whole novel?
It was hard. And, I was tempted. I actually wrote a couple of scenes from Nia's perspective, because I think one thing I like to do is make sure that I've chosen the right perspective for the book. And so I did write a couple of scenes from a perspective to see what would be different. And ultimately, I think, like I was saying earlier, I think that I preferred, KB's naivete and some of the things that we wouldn't know right away by following the journey through her eyes instead of Nia's. But I was definitely very interested in Nia's perspective. I think as it pertains to like staying in one character's perspective, it was very, very difficult. I made the conscious choice to tell this story through a first person present tense narrator, which isn't super common. And so I did, along the publishing journey, have lots of people suggest to me that I should change it in just, some different ways. Even like making it third person, allowing for there to be almost this other voice telling the story, and that would, ground things. And then we could, be in KB's perspective, but the world could be, the narration would be able to, be more flowery and more adult, and maybe that would appeal more to adult readers. But I didn't want that. I really liked the idea of everything being through KB's eyes and us not being able to see anything but what she wanted us to see. But it was very hard to stick with that. And so what would happen is I would write, a bunch of scenes, and then I would go back and then I would cross off half of what I had written, because I would realize like, this isn't KB's perspective. She wouldn't know this, or this isn't her voice. She wouldn't talk like this. So a lot of it was me having to go back after writing and fixing things up. What I will say is about halfway through, I got very familiar with her voice, and that was great, because then I just would know, like, as I started to write something, I'd be like, KB would never say that. So then I'm just going to delete it right away. So it got easier as it went along, but I was constantly having to check myself. And even once the book sold, then I think there was more of that with like my editor, and then the copy editor, my agent, everyone was just like had eyes on it. And it's like, I don't know if KB would really know that or would really say that like that. So yeah, it was a long process.
Awesome. Thanks, Talisha. That was a great question. It looks like, does anybody else have a question? Do you have another one, Talisha? Are you good? Okay. All right.
I see Sonia's hand.
Yes, Sonia. Let me make sure you're unmuted. There you go.
Am I
Hi, Mom.
Hi. Hi, babe. I just wanted to tell you that I really liked your naive narrator all the way through. She was very good. But what I appreciated most of all was the growth that I saw in the older sister, because at first she was so bitter. I mean, you can't blame her. She's been dumped on. Her mother's gone and she doesn't know what's happened. She got dumped on this old fogey grandpa, and she's out in the middle of nowhere and can't do anything. And luckily goes to the pool and meets some kids. And then she begins to stretch her wings. But finally, she does turn and see the little sister and realize her little sister's getting lost. And a lot of older kids with that much of an age range would not have turned around, but she did. She turned around and put out a hand and said, you know, you're valuable to me and I'm not going to lose you. And then that put them, I think, in a much stronger frame of mind, the three of them there in the house for when the mother does come back. Otherwise, she could have come back to such catastrophe. And so I thought you did a marvelous job with that. And I wanted to let you know, to get ready for this, Selena cooked greens and fried cornbread tonight just for this.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. Now I'm hungry. Thank you. Hi, Selena.
Okay, I want to know, because you mentioned the 2 books you're working on. Can you talk about those at all?
Yeah, so I haven't sold them yet. So at this point, it's just, you know, me writing. But I'm working on 2 different projects. One of them is a young adult novel. And so it also features a younger Black girl narrator, but I think she's 15, so more like Mia's age, and she's a high schooler. And this novel is more focused on social justice issues. And like I said, it's a young adult novel, so a bit of a different type of storytelling. And then the other book that I'm working on is a more fun novel. I've been kind of referring to it as a Black woman's Eat, Pray, Love, but it's taking some of the ideas from like Eat, Pray, Love, kind of tied in with a little bit of like Emily in Paris, which is a show that I love. And it's, you know, just kind of looking at the things that, you know, let's see, how do I want to describe this? As you can see, this is what I'm like when I haven't already like been prepped to talk about what a book is about. I'm just like writing it right now. So I don't have the cute little blurb ready. I'm like, I don't know, what is it about? But it's basically about this girl who hasn't really traveled. She hasn't really gone anywhere. She's never been out of the country. And she doesn't realize it, but her, you know, some of her parents' fears and traumas around traveling based on some of their, you know, what we call traveling while Black experiences and some of the racism that they've encountered during travels has kept her from traveling. And she didn't realize that that was what was limiting it. But her whole life, she's dreamed of traveling. And basically the book picks up when she has an opportunity to travel and decides that she wants to go after that opportunity. So it'll be a travel book, like a very fun book. She has a very fun group of girlfriends. And it'll be a pretty different vibe. It's an adult book. So yeah, those are the things I'm working on.
Well, I hope you get to travel some and do some cool research for that.
That is the plan. That is definitely the plan.
Well, this is a good segue because another Emily, not in Paris, I'm assuming, she just said, I just want to add that I listened to the audiobook and the narration was phenomenal. I will second that. Did you have a choice on that narrator?
I did. I was so excited that I had a choice because, you know, as an author, you don't know what things you're going to have control over. And I loved working with Tiny Reparations Books. That's my publisher, an imprint of Penguin Random House under the leadership of Phoebe Robinson. And they are amazing. I talked to them early on about how important it was for me to be able to make certain choices about the book. And they were all for it. That was what they wanted. The imprint is based around wanting to amplify and promote marginalized voices and really just give us like control of our stories being told. And so I was able to pick so many different things, including the audiobook narrator. So the way that the process worked is the team introduced me to, you know, a bunch of different people who were interested and who had auditioned to read the audiobook. And I was able to listen to all of the auditions. And we went with Zenzi Williams, who's an actress, a Black actress. It was really important for me to have the narrator be a Black woman. She's amazing. She's so good. I couldn't believe the things that she was able to do because at first I had like convinced myself that like, oh, maybe I could do it. I could not do it. I would not have been able to do that. I'm very glad we hired a professional and she did an amazing job.
Well, all the books, all the ways also said, yes, Zenzi Williams was amazing.
Yeah.
And Emily also reiterated how much she loved that the voice was told through KB's eyes throughout the book.
Thank you.
And did you also get a choice for the cover? Because
I did.
Gorgeous. There's so many compliments, and it really is. It gave me vibes from before you even got to this book and the story. I was thinking, this reminds me so much. And then when you came, I was like, yes.
Yeah,
So,
that was actually on purpose. I was able to, I was a part of that process. We started off by me giving them, I sent over covers that I wanted us to think about or have in mind as we were working on this cover. And I sent them that one, the Salvage the Bones cover, a few different things. And we, tried out a bunch of different artists. We ended up going with the designers who work within the team. And so they created a bunch of different designs. This part of the process was really cool because Phoebe Robinson was like very vocal the whole time as we were trying to pick a cover. And Phoebe is, for those who don't know, she's a comedian, actress, author, just all around phenomenal, dope. She's actually did a podcast called Two Dope Queens. She's very dope. She's absolutely a dope queen. And she is very busy. She had her next book coming out and she's doing a TV show and all kinds of things, but she still took time to be a part of every conversation about the cover of this book. At first, when we got some of the first designs, I'm like a new author and I didn't know, what was going on. So I was just saying that everything was so nice because I was just so happy to be here. So we were like getting cover designs and I'm like, oh, I love it. Oh, I love it, to like everything. And then at some point, Phoebe comes into the email thread and she's like, y'all, this ain't it. Like, let's start from scratch. This isn't even what Kai said she was looking for. Like, here are the things we should be prioritizing. And then that helped me find my voice. And then I was able to really like jump in the conversation and be like, yeah, actually, these are not great. Like, they look nice, but they're not what I'm hoping for. But when this cover came across in the email thread, it was the first time that all of us agreed on a cover. Like right away, we all liked it. And so I knew like, this is the one.
What a great family publishing world. I mean, what a great experience, especially for your first novel. Like, congratulations.
It's been a dream come true. Thank you.
Well, good luck on your next two books. We're excited to read anything you put out. But I will say thank you again to you and to all the readers out there for joining. Please make sure and check out her website, her Instagram for what's coming. I would love everybody to follow me if you could, the LB's Lovers of Books on Facebook or LB the Lover of Books on Instagram. We have lots of chats coming up. Right here, Kaiki, another debut author, is going to be interviewing July the 10th. So you have plenty of time to read it. It's going to be exciting. It's a tale of Indian folklore where a girl changes herself from a princess to a warrior. So I love that perspective. It's going to be something I've never read before. But again, thank you all. Thank you, Mike, for running it behind the scenes. I appreciate everybody being here and I hope to see y'all next time.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Oh, we'll announce the winner I'll find you on your social media.
Yes, the winner. And also I think I said that I was only on Twitter, but I am author Kai Harris on pretty much every social media. So whatever you like, you can find me there.
Awesome. Good night, everybody.
Bye.